Hello, liberty lovers. Welcome to the Great Sheep stage, your dose of unconventional politics. Today, my guest doesn't need much introduction for those of you who are in the liberty movement. But for the others, let me introduce you to, as he likes to be called, Chief Liberty Officer of Liberty.me, a new website where liberty lovers get together to share ideas and web links, read ebooks, and discuss about various subjects like health, philosophy, and entertainment. Jeffrey Tucker, thanks for being with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
First, tell us about yourself. Have you ever walked down the road to serfdom? If so, what brought you back to the road to freedom? If not, what made you walk down the road to freedom since it's not the most common road?
That's a very interesting question. I don't think I've ever been asked that before. You know, there was a time very early on when it was early on in the Cold War. While the Cold War was still going on, I kind of became a warmonger. This was a long time ago, but there's something about warmongering in those days in the height of the Cold War that was attractive. It kind of appealed to a certain patriotism and chauvinism, you know, a certain sense of mission and calling. The Cold War was all about this great Manichaean struggle, the big ideas between, you know, godless communism and, you know, the alleged freedom of the West. And that was an exciting thing to me. My professors, who were basically socialists, and I knew there was something wrong with socialism, were all against the Cold War and were for disarmament. So I thought that the right position was to take everything the opposite of what they said. And of course that landed me right in the heart of right-wing ideology, right? So I hadn't discovered libertarianism yet. So I had to kind of work myself out of that a little bit. And what triggered it for me was the discovery that the leaders of the ideology I had embraced, which was kind of right-wing conservatism, were essentially just as much liars as the people on the other side. And discovering that, I realized, you know, I need to stop picking my ideology based on preset, pre-canned, pre-formulated packages that the government is giving me, and I need to start thinking for myself, because neither of these points of view are really true. So I had to kind of engage in a long struggle to find out what was true, and it took me, you know, quite a long time after that, actually, to finally arrive at what's been a very stable position in my own life, which is just kind of a pure anarchist position, and I've felt very happy with it ever since.
You said you were supportive of the Cold War and of warmongering in general. Was it the same case in your family? Were they red, blue, or colored?
Yeah. No, it was interesting. I remember when I was very young, when I first gained a political consciousness, I went to my mother and I said, "Mommy, are we Republicans or Democrats?" And she said, "We are Republicans." And I thought that this was like telling me what I am. You know, it's like a birthright or a covenant handed on to you because of the circumstances of time and place and your family. So that was the identity I adopted. And it's like I say, it took me a long time to get away from that. I began to think of Democrats as the other. And there's actually a very interesting point here. I had a very good friend when I was in second and third grade. We were really best friends. His name is Victor Rede, and he was the child of immigrants from Mexico, and we were best friends, really, and hung out constantly. And when I found out I was a Republican, I went to him and I said, "You know, what are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm a Democrat." And suddenly there was like this division between us. You know, for the first time, we were best friends. You know, and so suddenly it was weird. It's like, uh-oh, you're with a different tribe. I didn't know that. You know, and so here you have this completely artificial designations based on a bunch of lies. And, you know, they already created a tension between me and my best friend when I was in third grade. So, you know, it's a great illustration of the pointlessness of politics, really. That something like that could happen to you based on absolutely nothing. Neither of us really even knew what the words meant.
Well, since you talk about divisions, I don't know if it created division, but how did your family react when you got away from the dichotomy and said you were libertarian, or how they reacted when they said you were an anarchist?
Well, this was a time really, it was about the time when the Cold War was winding down and everybody was beginning to rethink all the old ideological views. Everything had been frozen for like 40 years really. And so suddenly this epic change of the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War invited really everybody to kind of rethink everything that we thought we knew. And so my parents were of the same mind, and they basically kind of more or less came around too. They became independents, so it wasn't so shocking to them. I think my mother is still alarmed at my anarchism and doesn't really understand it. Mainly, she's just glad that I don't have tattoos, long hair, and carry bombs.
You have the bow tie.
But it's funny, when I think back of those days, things are so different now. People are far more inclined to be independent, really, than they used to be. There was a time when really everybody was divided. You had to choose sides in the old days, or else you just weren't part of the civic conversation. Now, more and more, you find people that are just radically uninterested in politics. They think it's just a scam. Maybe they lean left or they lean right, but mostly they don't identify with one or the other. It's in some ways we live in far less politicized times today than existed in the past. People are far less likely to attach themselves to some grand national project and much more concerned about their own lives and well-being, especially with the Great Recession that's continuing. Difficult, hard times really, essentially for all Americans right now. And people realize what really matters is their own well-being and their own liberties. That's more and more, I think, an awareness among whole groups of people and races. The divisions that we used to experience between race and sex and religion and demographics and stuff like that are lessening. They only intensify really around election times. That's when they get kind of hysterical again, but then they vanish just as quickly, really. So we live in much better times than we used to.
Would you say that this illusion is only nationwide, or would you say it also on the state level where people call themselves independent?
Well, let's see. Nationwide, you mean nation versus globe? I mean, because the liberal revolution has taken...
I mean federal versus state. Would the state level politics be as independent? Or
Yeah. It's hard even these days to get people interested in state level politics. I mean, people tend to be a little bit interested in local politics because it actually affects things like whether their trash is picked up on Tuesday or Wednesday, and federal politics national politics has a kind of a grand vision kind of drama to it. It's like the Super Bowl or something like that. But state level politics, like who becomes your state senator, who's your state legislature, that doesn't really touch anybody's lives in any way. So there's a real sort of non-interest there, which in a strange way has turned state level politics into just a pure and obvious racket. People run to represent special interests, and they represent those at the State House, either protecting their companies against too many impositions or seeking subsidies for them. Everybody's got a scam. Everybody's got a con going on at all levels of state politics everywhere, and I think that's pretty obvious. I mean, this is all part of a kind of a global meltdown of the political project. We're in the 21st century now. It's a digital age. There's so much about politics that's thrown back and old world, ancient regime, kind of ethos to it. The nation state is so 20th century, really.
Well, speaking about the digital age, tell us about Liberty.me. What is it, and where did the idea to create that website come from?
Well, the whole thing came about in the early 2013 because I had been working for Laissez-Faire and had been out of the web building business for a while. And so when I began to kind of look and see what had happened over the previous 2 years, I was amazed at the technological possibilities. Virtualization had made tremendous advances. Open source software had given us multi-blogging platforms that were available at very low cost as compared with 5 years previously, where these kinds of things were unaffordable. And I began to kind of think about all the possibilities for sort of global engagement and conversation, live classrooms and communication and book downloads and everything. And I didn't see anybody else taking advantage of all these tools to serve the cause of liberty, at least not in one big space and not in a kind of an open source conversation way. So many of the websites in the liberty space are just one way. You know, it's like, here's our content, now you consume it. But I really wanted a world that was much more like a city, where there's a constant ongoing communication and scalability and surprise and creativity. So I couldn't give up the dream really for the whole spring and the summer. And by the fall, I finally found some investors that were willing to take a risk, and I threw myself into it. It took us about 8 months of building, really. And then we've been open now 4 months, and I'm just absolutely thrilled with the results, and everybody else is too. We've got a lot of happy people who just enjoy it so much. Some people are daily users. Some people are hourly users. I mean, like a full-scale addiction. You know, they stay in the chat windows, you know, all the time. Other people come and go, but it's really nice for even the people who come and go, because, you know, they've got an evening off. They can always log on and attend a class, you know. We've had something like 120 individual classes with about 90 different professors teaching in these nightly classes. So you can log on anytime or not log on. You can log on and download all the books you want. You can get involved in a discussion, read what other people have to say about these books, get on chat. There's always something to do on liberty.me. So, you know, to my mind, it's worth if you subscribe for a year, it's $9 a month, and that's, I spent more than that this morning at the convenience store for a biscuit and a coffee. So, you know, this is a full-scale, full immersion into the world of liberty. The other thing I really like about it is that it's a happy community. I mean, there's no homogeneity. I mean, people disagree on all kinds of issues. I mean, like even in the forums, we have big debates about religion and contentious issues like abortion or Middle East politics and all these kinds of things. But there's no flame wars that I see. At least maybe I've seen 2 or 3 since the site began, but you come to expect a certain level of civility, and that's really nice because it means that you don't get in a bad mood. Actually, you know, you can just kind of you can just debate with people and learn, which is a really nice thing.
Well, the way I see it is that people there are reasonable, so therefore there are reasonable debates. It's not, as we say in French, a death's dialogue.
Death's dialogue. That's really interesting. That's a good phrase. I just use the word flame war. I get tired of it, really. You know, on Twitter, Facebook, not so much, because I've learned to not engage these kinds of things. If I see people throwing mud at each other, I just go somewhere else. But Twitter still tempts me every once in a while. You know, I'll get somebody lashing out at me in a tweet, you know, and you're looking on your phone, and, you know, it's like we have an instinct to like reply and insult back, and then it's another insult. So I've had to kind of train myself to just, you know, back away and not be part of it. But it's annoying, really. And I like Liberty.me because that doesn't happen. I mean, I want to be confronted with ideas I disagree with. Like one of the members of Liberty.me, he joined just so that he could post on his own publishing site a long series of defenses of intellectual property. Now, I totally disagree with that. I'm a complete opponent of intellectual property. But I find myself like really interested in his arguments. So I read every one of his articles, and I try to challenge myself to try to figure out like what's wrong. And it helps me, you know, or maybe what's right. You know, I don't know. But I like to be challenged with my views. That's really exciting. I'm bored of the idea that we arrive at some final truth and then like dedicate the rest of our lives to asserting that against all contrary positions. That's very boring. It also seems to be rather dangerous intellectually because nobody's right on everything. We don't have all the answers to everything, as Hayek teaches us. So I like to have contrary positions, and so I'm really proud of the diversity and heterogeneity of positions within Liberty.me. The one thing that everybody agrees on is that there should be more liberty, and liberty is the font of prosperity, peace, and beauty in the world. So if you can get that right, you can have a really wonderful conversations and working out the specifics. So I feel like Liberty.me has become a source of my own intellectual growth, and actually more importantly, it's changed aspects of the way I live. You know, it's helped to train me to think outside the mold that the government has given us. It's surprising how much of our lives, how much we defer to the central plan. And the central plan is all around us all the time. And so to creatively get out of that plan and to live in a freer way requires a consciousness of the fact that there is a plan, and then a creativity to find the workaround. And that requires a certain amount of deliberation.
Well, speaking of central plan, I just watched Divergent yesterday. Very interesting movie.
Yeah.
Was it based on a book?
Yeah, there's a book by the same title. I think there's some small differences, but yeah, I like that movie too. I thought it was really good. I like all this young adult fiction, like Hunger Games and that sort of thing. Did you happen to notice that there was the Guardian magazine in the UK, or newspaper in the UK, attacked young adult fiction for being too libertarian?
I posted a link on the Freedom Links.
Yeah. I was waiting for somebody to notice this, because it's great, right? You go to the movies and you get a great attack on tyranny and despotism and these young rebels rising up against it. I mean, that's what you want, so that's really great.
Well, still against central planning, on Liberty.me there is a great emphasis on cryptocurrencies, mainly bitcoins. Without doing a PhD dissertation on the subject, what are they and where do they come from? And how they all created equal?
Well, those are big questions. The emergence of cryptocurrency is one of the great surprises. Currency has been nationalized for a better part of 100 years in almost every country, really, and we've forgotten what it's like to have a market in currency. Suddenly, in 2008, a protocol emerges that creates a perfect money and payment system through use of computer code. And it satisfies all the traditional requirements of money, but actually it's even better because it's weightless and takes up no space. But it was a shock to everybody, especially to monetary economists. They never imagined something like this could ever happen, but it did work over the course of 5 years. Bitcoin has really stabilized and become a major source of payment all over the world. It's a new global currency for a new age. It's so much better than national money. Because it can be transmitted peer-to-peer almost without cost. And it's just a beautiful technology. It's out of the bag now, and I definitely feel like it's the future. Also, we're seeing currency competition. So you've got Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dogecoin, all these other altcoins, and colored coins within the Bitcoin blockchain. So the technology is moving very, very fast. It's still a little bit in its early stages, so it can be a little scary to people who don't know anything about it. But you could say the same thing about electricity or railroads or internal combustion. It's always a little scary when it first comes along. But over the next 5 or 10 years, I'm expecting great things to come of cryptocurrency. I'm very excited about it. And if we can separate money from the state, politics will never be the same.
Do you see any of those cryptocurrencies overcoming the others? Or it's going to be a fierce competition for a long time?
Well, Bitcoin has got all the network effects working for itself, so it's by far the most dominant, by far, in the world. But I can't say, I'm used to being surprised. You think you know things, and then suddenly history turns out differently. So some other currency could actually beat Bitcoin. And that's good. I mean, it's good to have a lot of different cryptocurrencies. I mean, literally there are probably by now tens of thousands of altcoins out there that are running on their own blockchains. That's pretty amazing, it seems to me. That's really exciting. I love this idea of currency competition. Whether the world will finally settle on one, I don't know, and I kind of hope not, actually. I like the idea of ongoing competition between currencies.
Some people, and I admit among those people, that are a little skeptic towards cryptocurrencies since I've read from some Messians that it has basically no backing like Federal Reserve notes. Do you agree?
Well, I thought this was true for a very long time, and I was confused about the source of Bitcoin's value. And I even started writing about Bitcoin long before I had figured this out in my own mind. So now, a year and a half later, I think I have a pretty good answer to that question. It's not right to think of Bitcoin as just a currency. in the same sense that like the dollar is just a currency or just a money. I'm using these terms interchangeably. Bitcoin is not just a money, it's a payment system. And that payment system is particularly brilliant because the blockchain, nobody had ever seen anything like it. It solved a major mathematical problem that's always existed. It allows for the porting of verifiable, time-stamped bits of information that are scarce goods, peer-to-peer, anywhere in the world through digital channels. Nothing like this has ever been possible. And it works because it's a distributed system on an open source ledger. So it can be constantly verified, and it is constantly verified. In fact, the people who are confirming the transactions are incentivized to verify the blockchain to make sure that there's no double spending. So that blockchain technology is what gave Bitcoin its value. It's important to remember that Bitcoin existed as a technology and a living technology. In other words, you had miners mining Bitcoins and trading Bitcoin all over the world for about 10 months before there was any posted price to Bitcoin. That's the important prehistory. And you can actually look at the history and see that there were about 100 transactions a day between January 9th of 2009 and October the 5th of the same year. Average daily transactions of 100. So why are people transacting something that has no value, right? I mean, what they were doing is testing out the network to see if it really worked as it was supposed to work. And once it gradually dawned on all the users that it was working exactly as it should, and some of the code was patched up and things were fixed up, then the unit that was attached to the blockchain, namely the Bitcoin, began to obtain a value. And so it gains that value out of the blockchain in the same sense that out of the usability and use value of the blockchain. So in that same sense, salt became money because salt, began as a valuable commodity to flavor food, or gold was valuable for jewelry, or beaver pelts were valuable for clothing. So Bitcoin was valuable for its blockchain services of transporting information bits all around the world in a peer-to-peer format in a way in which had never been done before. So that's where Bitcoin obtained its value. And to that extent, I think it accords very closely with Menger and Mises' own story of where money comes from. But you have to understand something about the technology to get that.
Okay. You constantly speak of blockchain. Is this where the Bitcoins are mined?
It's where the ledger exists that tells the story of how many Bitcoin there are and where they're going and what they're doing, so that there can't be any double spending. It's really just like if you could think of a big book that's taking records of transactions, income and outgo. Like if you look at your bank ledger, online, it's the same thing except for it's the whole world. So new Bitcoins are entered into the blockchain, are created out of verification processes and confirmations. Those are admitted to the blockchain as new, and they're assigned a title to the people who obtain them because of the mining services. And when those people move coins to some other person, that is also registered. So every single transaction is registered on the blockchain. You can see them happen in real time on many, many websites. And the blockchain you can download to your home computer and let it run in real time and watch this taking place. So that's really what it is. It's a way of keeping track of property, essentially.
Okay. Changing subjects now. As I've been more implicated in the liberty movement, I seem to have observed a kind of division between the objectivists, Miesians, anarchists, minarchists, etc. Do you think there is a division in the liberty movement? If so, what could bring us together? If not, what could make us stronger, since mainstream media seems to be between they ignore you and they mock you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the mainstream. I love all these articles coming out recently attacking libertarians. It's really fun. I mean, people get depressed about these articles. I'm actually excited about them. I mean, if they're not attacking you, then you don't matter. So the fact that Salon Magazine almost every day has a big attack on libertarians is great, because I think this is the way the world's headed, and they don't like it. As far as the divisions, yeah, there are different varieties out there. I like divisions. I don't think it's a problem as long as everybody's sincere about their beliefs, and as long as we can maintain a civility between people. I don't think divisions are a problem. I don't really long for unity in any way. I just hope that people can be intelligent and civil about their disagreements. It's when people start demonizing others and say, oh, the objectivists are evil, or the left libertarians are evil, or the right libertarians are evil. That's when it gets a little bit nasty and pointless. I don't really like to engage in those kinds of things. I just like to. I think it's nice to have a good community of conversation, even if there's a great deal of diversity within it.
So this diversity could actually do us good?
I think so. It helps us all grow. I don't know how you think about these things, but for me, I require a kind of daily intellectual stimulation. I just do. I want to have my ideas tested against reality, against other theories, against people who disagree with me. It keeps me on my toes and helps me think of things, to write about, and keeps me interested and keeps me, honest, really, intellectually. So I like to have a variety of positions out there, and I really like to read things I disagree with, because I always want to be in a position of learning all the time. I think it's kind of boring to imagine that we've all arrived at one truth. There's no reason to get up in the morning. If I've ever figured out everything that there is to know in the whole world, I think it's time to dig a big hole in the ground and fall in it.
And do you have any projects in the following weeks, months?
Okay, so I'm working on many projects actually right now. One is a kind of some commentaries on the parables of Jesus in light of the idea of liberty. It's a very interesting project I'm able to pick up and kind of work on. I'm still building Liberty.me and teaching every single Sunday night, really. That consumes a lot of time. I have always about 5 articles in my head I want to write. I'm actually also working on a book on the economics of love. And by that I mean that I think embedded within the market order is a kind of a deep and ongoing relationships of love at all levels. And I think it's a really important insight, so I'm trying to turn that essay into a book. And continuing to work with the Foundation for Economic Education. I'm also continuing to do work with Laissez-Faire Books. Those are fun projects too, because I'm able to read new literature I've never read and write commentaries on them and summaries. Like before the end of the weekend, I'm going to read Walden and write a summary of it. I've never read Walden, which is a little bit silly actually, but I never have. And Walden, it's a book by Thoreau. It's a kind of a reflection on the things he learned by living alone in a cabin for some months, and he wrote a book called Walden. And so is the 19th century existential work. So I get to read that and write a book summary of it. So I'm excited about that. And then also stay forever busy on Liberty.me, commenting and discussions and reading articles and writing articles. So yeah, it's a good life, busy life, but loads of fun. Thank you for asking.
Any final thoughts?
No, I mean, I guess my final thought is that one of the reasons I'm excited about Liberty.me is that we're on the cutting edge of technology, and we're using all the tools that's been given to this generation to push forward the liberty agenda. There's also a philosophy behind it that I really like, which is that I think it's time we start taking responsibility for our own liberties and our own lives. It's a little bit late to be hoping that the government's going to be able to take care of us and reform itself and give us liberty. I don't believe that anymore. So I'm really excited about all the various ways in which we can kind of innovate and create and change our own lives to build a kind of liberty for the future. I see the future in many ways as being a world kind of divided between people who are brainlessly and hopelessly compliant with the regime and a whole generation of rebels who are trying to think their way out of the system. And that's, I think, going to be the real division in the world. And I think the future belongs to those who are creatively trying to get out from under the tyranny of our age.
Well, thank you for this wonderful interview. For those of you who still haven't joined Liberty.me, you can do it and save $5 a month on your subscription by entering the code BASTIAT-SAY. Hope to see you all of you there eventually. And in order to shock geeks, may liberty be with you.
Thank you so much for having me today.